Well, generally speaking, when I see the caliber of people that do these talks, I feel like a bit of an imposter because I'm not one of the great and adventurous sorts that have done all sorts of high alpine peaks and adventures to the high Arctic and all sorts like that. I've started and my career in mountaineering has been maybe a bit more modest, and I haven't done huge amounts of hut-to-hut touring, and so I renamed the name of the tour and I split it into 3 parts. So my journey with the Eagles Ski Club, my journey to leading my first tour, and then each of those are about a quarter of the talk, and then the second half will be a focus on the tour that my first tour that I led in March of last year. Each third of the talk has got a different background, and this background is actually a talk from Svalbard. It has nothing to do with hut-to-hut touring, but it was just a nice picture. So this is the start of part 1. My journey started at the F for Fabulous Mar Lodge in 2007. F because I've got a few Fs sprinkled through the talk. And I should linger for about 30 years on this slide, because behind this are an awful lot of years of mountaineering in Scotland, from walking in the valleys to walking on the hills in summer to walking on the hills on winter, a bit of climbing on rock, a bit of climbing on ice, and then achieving a long-held goal. It probably took me 20 years to reach the point where I got a set of skis and combined walking and skiing in the Scottish mountains. My first set of skis were bought on eBay, a pair of Scott something or others with Silvretta 404 bindings and lace-up boots, and I thought I was the bee's knees and did a lot of falling over. But oh, so I should say as well, so 2007, this is Mar Lodge. Mar Lodge is a fabulous place owned by the National Trust for Scotland. It's near Braemar in the Highlands of Scotland in the Cairngorm. This was an absolutely pivotal weekend for me. This was the first meet that I'd had with the Eagles. I met folks there. I found a great welcome. I met new friends, and I shared a room. I shared a room with this guy who I'd never heard of before, called Alan Sloan. That might make one or two of you chuckle who know my ongoing friendship with Alan. Alan and I have then, from that weekend, Alan and I went on to do most of our Scottish adventures together, and quite a few in the Alps and elsewhere. So from that weekend, it certainly transformed my leisure life, or my winter leisure life. So later in 2007, I went on my first trip to the Alps, not an Eagles-based trip, but with three wonderful people, Malcolm Slessor, Jane King, and John Howell, all a little bit older than me, and they trusted their period of holiday to me, a rookie, a younger person, untested. But we had a really super week together. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And so I'm picking out this one because we were generally valley based, but we did spend 3 nights in huts, in 2 different huts. And this is us approaching the Mont Tabor, or the Refuge de Tabor, below Mont Tabor. And for those who might not have spent time in a hut, I'm sure you've heard various tales of huts, from the glorious to the gory. My experience, I have to say, in all of my touring has been my hut experience has been very positive. We hear horror tales of there being so many people. You have to cram into rooms, sleep on sleeping platforms with lots of smelly strangers. I think for, I would say, 95% of my overnights in huts, I have always stayed in a room that is just our group. So we've had that degree of security and privacy and togetherness without having been crammed up with lots of other people. Mont Tabor, or the refuge of Tabor, is the only time I've had to sleep on a sleeping platform. But we were a group of 4, and there were only 2 other people in the hut. So there was lots of room, certainly not crammed. And I loved this hut. This is out there, kind of really feels away from everything. It's a small timber building with toilet facilities, albeit you've got to go outside, with hot and cold running water, possibly less of an emphasis on the hot and not so much on the running, but certainly at water. When you arrived, the rookie was sent out with a backpack and go and dig a hole in the ice to get into the loch, the lake, and get 20 litres of water or whatever it was, so that the hut warden could make supper for us that night. So then that was 2007, was a gap, and then 2010 I was on my first proper Eagles alpine meet, which was an off-piste skiing sort of skills course based in Maribel with Roy Henderson of New Generation, and I learned a great deal. These guys, they go a long way to improving your skiing and finding out, or giving you tips and clues as to help you not fall down quite so often. And I do remember the time I was out with Alan, and I said, Alan, I didn't fall down today. And things have got better since then. In 2011, the year after, Alan was organising and facilitating a tour to the Otla region, and I joined him on that, which was quite a big step up, but it was absolutely excellent, just fabulous. This picture is representative of the weather we had. We were away in the hills for 7 days, staying in 5 different huts. And this is a picture of us high on Monte Zebru, looking out across the hill. Well, actually, the terrain we'd covered in the previous days. So the sort of twin-peaked hill in the distance is the wonderfully named Monte Cevedale. I like that name. We had come up from the left on that broad glaciated terrain and climbed the peaks, and then skied down the glacier that is running down the middle of the picture towards us and across to the right to stay at the Pizzini hut. My next F, which is slightly contrived, but it's to formulate a plan. None of these things happen if we don't plan. There's the organizer's got a great deal of planning to do as he considers which hut to stay in, what route to choose, when to go. But we all individually have to plan. We've obviously got to plan our travels, but we have to plan what we're going to take. And so we end up with a big pile of gear. This was actually in Alan's house at the time before we went, both looking quite pleased with ourselves at the prospect of going away. And you end up with what you think is a modest amount of stuff to take, but you might have a spare one of these and this piece just in case, and so on. And you arrive on site, and normally what happens with these sort of tours is that you rendezvous at a hotel in the valley somewhere, where you get to meet all the other participants in the tour and get to know each other a little bit and discuss what you're going to do, and do any final gear shuffling. And that's the point at which the thing that you might just need, well, you might just not, and we'll leave that one behind. And I don't need a second pair of pants, we'll leave those behind. And I can wash my socks out, so I'll leave the spare socks behind. And you really par it down, because you're going to be carrying it for the next 7 days. And every ounce you can save is an ounce more joy on the mountain. Another F is for friends. Just wonderful. You meet people, you spend time with people, you spend quality time in the mountain. You're trusting each other, you're experiencing wonderful things together, and great friendships are forged in the mountains. The next F is probably my favorite F. F is for food. one of the things you find when you're doing consecutive days of mountaineering is that your appetite just goes up and up, and you can put away a whole stack of food and enjoy it more at these times than perhaps you do at any other time. And I'm getting hungry just as I look at those eggs and ham. Oh. Another F is for faith, sprinkled across the tops of many alpine mountains, and on the passes and the journeys that people travel are crosses and crucifixes, as people have sought out the reassurance of a higher power to guide their way and keep them safe. And we'll come back to that as we pass through the pass of the Grand Saint Bernard later in the talk. So Monte Zubru, 3735 meters. This was the ultimate target of the Otla tour, and I saw it, I don't know, a couple of days in, and we were to be climbing it 3 or 4 days later, and I was quite comfortable that you know, I wasn't going to be doing that. That's just not my pigeon. That's a lot bigger than the sort of things I've been used to doing, and it looks really intimidating. And it is intimidating when you see this. And that's one of the things for folks who haven't done so much in the Alps, I want to really encourage you in, because you don't have to do the nasty, spiky, death-defying things. You can do things you're comfortable with. You can ski through passes. You don't have to go up the summits all the time. So anyway, I decided I would tag along and we'd ski the approach bit, and we'll see how we're doing it. So the red line is the approach. We came in, we zigzagged up that bit of slope on skis and cached the skis at the end of the red line, and then booted up the purple dotty line. And actually, you know, it wasn't too bad. The first bit of purple dotty line might be around about grade 1 Scottish. And then that big snow slope that looks horribly steep from here, actually it wasn't steep. It was sort of a steep walk, but it wasn't a climb. It is sort of foreshortened as we look at it in this picture. And then just at the top there's a rock band. Well, that's probably the bit I felt most uncomfortable on. Not so much going up, again, probably around about grade 1, maybe a bit more. And we got onto the top, and there's this little bit on top, and there seemed to be an awful lot of people wanting to stand on this little bit of mountain for some reason. But great sensation of achievement to be up there, and then return to come down. And a mountain isn't won until you're down safely. And so we were coming down here, and we did get down safely. But this little descent here was the bit that grabbed me a little bit as I down climbed it facing in, which was okay. But one of our other team members, Paul Cook, was quite happy to saunter down it facing outwards. Didn't quite have his hands in his pockets, but he seemed very relaxed about it, a lot more relaxed than I was. So that was the Otla. We now jump 3 years to the Ötztal. Those of you who know Alan will know that he had a health issue between those years, and so we hadn't done anything together for a few years. And this was Alan's first foray back into alpine touring. We were in the Ötztal on a tour organised and led by Graham Dudley, another top shelf guy. He was a real confidence-inspiring and considerate leader. Alan and I went a little bit early, and we ended up spending 12 days travelling through the mountains, staying in 5 different huts, booking cols, not peaks, and just to get Alan back into things. But this is what I go back to, is not doing all the nasty peaks all the time. Journeying for 12 days through the various cols and through the mountains from hut to hut is a wonderful experience. You certainly don't have to achieve peaks to have the most wonderful time and great adventures. So on this tour, I'm going to spin you through a few huts. So sorry, we'll jump back to that. That's outside, I believe, the Hochjoch hut. Someone's probably going to correct me, but I'm pretty sure that's the Hochjoch. Here we have the Martin Bush hut. All of them, as I said, they were very comfortable. Food was great. The accommodation was fine. And next up is the ice station. Sorry, not the ice station 0. The Similaren hut. Going from the Martin Bush, I think it was, up to the Similaren, that was what I call a Cairngorm blizzard day. We only covered a few kilometers that day, and the objective was to get to this hut, which we successfully did, obviously, but it was a good old blowy day, and nothing more was done that day. In fact, I don't think we did anything the next day as we sat out the storm. Hut life at the Similaren was particularly good. Here is the Otstal team, with starting on the right is Alan, Sonia, Graham, our leader. At the back there is Jamie Howard and Rupert Roshnick, with great plates of food. Particularly nice hut, particularly good. Now we jump again, and 2016 we're in Iceland. Valley-based day tours, guided by Rick Marchant. Now, I'd never done anything that was guided. This was a new experience for me. I'd got somebody who was telling us where we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And having done everything I had ever done for 40 odd years under my own steam and my own guidance, I took a bit of getting used to the idea of having a guide, but I did get there, and Rick is just the most wonderful guy. And I've done a number of other things with him since. And one of his penchants is for ice houses. So he taught us how to build a shovel-up igloo here, which, being an engineer, I had to load test, and he was skeptical of me standing on top of it, and was quite surprised when I stood on top and didn't fall through. So then Alan came up and joined me, and then somebody else came up and joined me, and we all stood on top of this thing that was just snow we'd shoveled up and hollowed out. When the other two got off, being an engineer, I had to test it to destruction, and got stuck. The others had to come and dig me out. I was completely stuck. My feet weren't on the ground, and there was no way I could move myself. And we jump again. 2018 Svalbard, a boat-based trip guided by Phil Wickens. Here you see maybe not a too unfamiliar scene. We see spiky bits of hills sticking up through a sea of something. But normally when we fly over the Alps, we might see something like this, and we would be seeing a sea of cloud. But this isn't a sea of cloud. This is a sea of ice and snow. Svalbard is some 200 kilometers by 300 kilometers, an archipelago of islands with the main town and most of the very limited population living in a place called Longyearbyen. And this trip was boat-based, and our home for the week was called the Norderlicht, a converted Baltic lightship. It's the one, the red one on the right there. Yeah. So we might be boat-based, but no shabby deals on meals. Candle-lit dinner for 6. Very, very good food, very good catering. No complaints there. A typical day tour would look like this. We would motor or sail up one of the fjords, anchor up, and we would be taken ashore in ribs, disembark and go off and climb some mountain and come back. And this is a typical scene. You'll see on the right there, Phil with a rifle on his shoulder. And one of the other people in the group here, I'm not sure which, has got a kind of flare gun type of, or flashbang gun. And it's all to do with polar bears. It was a requirement of the authorities that we took precautions against being gobbled up by a polar bear. And I just leave you with this Svalbard picture that just is such an evocative scene. So that's taken us through part 1 of the talk, and my 2200 in the top right-hand corner there tells me that I'm not running behind. Part 2 of the journey is my journey towards leading my first tour. The Eagles are a great club. They've given me so much in terms of friends and adventure and teaching to improve my skills in the mountain. But as I say, they're a very safety-focused club, and they're strongly focused on training as well. And I've been fortunate to benefit from a number of training sessions or training weeks not least the Maribel one I mentioned earlier on, through my journey with the Eagles. And when I tentatively put myself forward as a potential tour leader, I wasn't sure that I was the right guy for the job. As I said, I'm not a massive alpine guy. I'm not a guy who's done loads of hut-to-hutting, but I was prepared to stick my neck out and see whether I might cut the mustard. And as I say, the Eagles, with the focus on safety and doing things well, have a program, a potential tour leader program, where they help you assess yourself, and they assess us and run us through various bits of training until we reach a point where people feel comfortable for the potential tour leader to lead a tour. So the first part of the process is paperwork. Yippee, we love it, don't we? Forms, self-assessment, critical review. You're appointed a mentor, and the mentor will help lead you through this process and give you some prods and guidance, and catch up with you periodically to see how you're getting on with the process. But the process is driven by you. The mentor doesn't drive you. If you can't be bothered, then you're probably not the right guy for the job. Guy or gal. We're using guy generically here. And if you're doing self-critical assessment, critical review, you may be not the best judge. Some people think they're just absolutely the bee's knees and we'll just go and climb the north face of the Eiger next week. It'll be fine, guys. Come on, let's all go. Other people would think, well, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm up to it. Am I a leader? Have I got the skills? I don't know. So I'd probably land somewhere in the middle. I've led various things in Scotland, but of course the Alps is a different deal altogether. And so I wasn't so confident about doing stuff in the Alps. And so the thing to do here is to speak to people you know, speak to people you've skied with, and ask them, what do you think? Do you think I'm up for this? Do you think I've got the skills? And if you haven't got all the skills, that doesn't stop it either, because one of the things that comes out of this process is trying to identify areas where you think your skill set might be a little bit on the thin side. And the two key areas that I identified were glacier travel and avalanches. Now, you don't have to go on glaciers. There's loads of terrain in the Alps that you can travel without having to go on glaciers. You open up a whole new field of adventure if you're confident to travel on glaciers, and I'm getting there. I wouldn't say I would confidently go out onto a gnarly crevassed glacier leading a group at this stage, but I will do. But the one thing you can't avoid is avalanche risk. If you read an avalanche report, take note, they never say there's no risk. They might say there's a low risk, but a low risk is a risk. And you've got to learn how to manage that risk. And even when they say there's a high risk, that isn't necessarily a day that you have to sit in the hut. If you can choose your routes and your terrain carefully enough, with enough knowledge, and you have access to that sort of terrain, then possibly you can go out. But you need to learn about avalanches. And I would say you've never learned enough. If you think you know avalanches and you know everything there is to know, then I'm sorry, I'm not coming out with you. I think you're probably you might be a danger. A number of the experts in the field have died in avalanches. That maybe tells us something. So PTL, Potential Tour Leader Training, 2018. Here we are above Eosna with the inimitable Rick Marchant. He's the guy in the red jacket towards the left there, ably aided next door to him, just to the right there, by Neil Thompson, another top shelf guy. Love spending time with Neil. And this was about soft skills. This wasn't about teaching you how to ski, teaching you new techniques. It was about soft skills, about group management, managing yourself, managing the people you're with, also about choosing the line to ski, or particularly with a focus on aspect and something else, to find the best snow for the day. Because one of the things that keeps you safe is skiing nice snow. We all want to ski nice snow, but there are decisions you can make through your day to make sure you are skiing nice snow. If you go out on a slope that's not seen any sun, first thing in the morning, there's a good chance it's going to be all nasty and icy. And if you're skiing your steepest slopes first thing in the morning in the shade, then that's maybe not the best plan, or indeed skiing up such a slope. There are decisions you can make on your route to improve your chances of traveling safely and enjoyably. Shovel Up Igloo. This is still this course with Rick Marchant. Shades of Iceland. Here's Rick teaching us all how to do a shovel up again, which is always good fun. I like building ice houses. November 2019, first aid training in Glencoe. Where we found some music at the Clachagan. Good skills to have. We can all have these skills, first aid skills. They contribute to the group's overall safety, and it's something that I certainly would be very pleased to have the skills if I was confronted with a difficult situation. I'd be very pleased to at least have some sort of idea how to help and maybe offer some assistance to somebody in need. Training with the Avalanche Geeks, an Avalanche course here with Bruce Goodlag and Mike Austin. And it was a very good course. We were based, it was December 19, just before the whole COVID thing kicked off. This was to be just before I led my first tour. So I was just getting upskilled a bit just ahead of going out on my first tour. Here we're digging a snow pit, so we're digging down into the snow. We'll look at the depth of the snow. We're looking for different layers of snow as successive snow is deposited, whether it's falling straight out of the sky, whether it's wind transported snow, but also transformed snow where it is melted and refrozen. Or maybe there's a layer of graupel or something a bit like hailstones. I remember digging a pit with Alan, and we went down through nice solid snow, and we just hit this seemingly bottomless depth of what were like ball bearings. That was the point at which we rerouted the entire plan and went off in a different direction for the next 2 or 3 days. In the middle of this picture, you'll see what looks like a pillar of snow detached. Well, it is detached because we have isolated that pillar and then carried out tests by thumping it on top to see how easily it detaches, trying to identify any particular weak layers in the snow. We also did avalanche rescue scenarios, which are always good fun. So that was 19. I was supposed to run my Val Ferret tour in March 2020. We all know what happened in March 2020, and about a week before we were due to go, we just called time on it. We put it back on the program for 2021, but that was a bit half-hearted, and so it turned out, and it never happened. 2022, it did happen. And the Eagles, again, focused on looking after their people, recognized that people hadn't been out in the mountains much for the last 3 years. Possibly people hadn't skied for 3 years, and we were going to go out and lead tours. And so they put on this Leaders Training Week. I was very fortunate to be able to go on that. It was a group of, I think we were 8, should we say? And this was based in Le Bouet, up from Argentier, up from Chamonix, and led by Kath Murphy, who was really, really good and very encouraging. I particularly like her because she told me I was a strong skier. And my first reaction was, oh, that's nice. And I thought about it for a bit, and I interpreted that as substance over style. I can get down most things, but doesn't look too good. So here we are, various scenarios and skill sets we practiced. We're skiing roped up here. If you haven't tried this, it's just so much fun. You have to try it. Find somewhere steep, lumpy, bumpy, with various obstacles to get round. You'll wonder why you've never done this ever before. This is all said tongue in cheek, by the way. This is very difficult. Glacier kit. What do we carry in our bags to when we travel on glaciers? You might notice here I've got a different background. This isn't Svalbard anymore. This is Scotland. Meal and ptarmigan in the Ben Lawrence group. And skiing on glaciers, Kath took us down the Mer de Glace, which was my first time, and just a fantastic, wonderful trip through mountain scenery, covering really quite a distance in a day, through all sorts of scenery, and learning a lot about traveling on glaciers and being careful and such like. Emergency shelters. Here's Kath in a little snow hole, hiding away in a emergency shelter. If you get caught out, this sort of thing could save your life. Emergency repair kits. Again, what do people carry in their packs in case of a mishap with the skis? Various bits and pieces. Different people carry different stuff, but there are usually commonalities. Improvised stretchers. I'm the unfortunate victim here. I got trussed into a pair of skis and various bits and pieces to form an improvised sledge, and the idea is that then you ski off down the hill and everybody's happy. But actually it turned out that it was really quite difficult to make progress down, it must be said, a modest hill, but downhill in even slightly soft snow. It was more a question of dragging than skiing. Moral of the story, don't break your leg. So that brings us to part 3 of this talk. Which is the tour that I organized, from titled Val Ferret to Val Entremont, or on the map here you'll see Entrève to Bourg-Saint-Pierre, or another way of looking at it is it went from the southern portal of the Mont Blanc tunnel to the northern portal of the Saint Bernard tunnel. This map now forms the background to the next series of slides, and the red and blue bits are the continuous journey, sort of from A to B, if you like, and the yellow bits are day tours that we did as we went along. The gear, here's a picture of all my bits and pieces that we took on this journey. At the Refugio Frassati, where the blue and red line joins just to the right of the picture there, we had a winter room. The winter room is unwardened, unheated room to the back of a normal mountain hut. So we were carrying a few extra things to deal with that. We had to carry our own food, which you don't have to normally into a hut where they usually feed you very well. Stove, gas, bits and pieces like that. And we hadn't been there before. Nobody could tell us anything about it, other than people at the who owned it. They told us there were duvets. Well, were there duvets or were there not? So we trusted in my my linguistic skills, which are very limited, and decided we would trust that there would be duvets, and we didn't take sleeping bags. So day one, typically I said on a tour we would rendezvous somewhere at a hotel before we set off, and so on this occasion we rendezvoused at Martenay. We've got a train out there from Geneva. We actually took a little train up to a place called Salvan, stayed in a cracking little hotel there, and then took the train from Salvan through the mountains, past Le Bouillet, Valserine, and down into Chamonix tremendous train run through the mountains, just wiggling along high up above the valley floor. And from Chamonix, we took a bus through to Entreves, from where we kicked off. Going up the Val Ferret from Entreves. We got a little bus to take us the first bit of the way, so we cheated a bit. And heading for the Refugio Bonati, at the end of the red line there. The team, myself on the left, Marcus next to me, Steve at the background there, and Niall on the right. This is us standing outside our little hotel in Salvan before we set off. This was a photograph that just had to be taken. This was our true starting point. Setting off up Val Ferret, I was quite pleased with this picture. And we set off up this broad, flat-bottom valley, very civilized, lots of other people around, walkers, families, people with sledges, people skiing, people Nordic skiing, and until we reached the head of the valley, and then we broke off to start our climb and climbed up to Refugio Bonati. Here we are, we're arriving there. Lovely building set in amongst the mountains. Day 2 is a shakedown day. It's the yellow loop shown on the map here, where we set off to climb Tête Entre Deux Sautes, 2729 meters. The idea here being, well, you know what? We haven't met and skied together before. There's 4 of us, all fairly unknown quantities. We've chatted in the bar sort of thing, but not much more than that. We've skied up a flat-bottomed valley floor. Well, hopefully we can all do that. But can these guys actually, what are they like on steep terrain? Can they work harsh-eyes? What are they like when it comes to going down? Can they, what's their skiing like? So it's a chance to go out together, do a bit of a tour, and if someone's a disaster, well, we can send them home again. And from Bonati back down into the valley is a pretty safe and easy exit. And people either, if they were decided they were unhappy, they could back out at this stage. So we set off that morning up. It was I think it's the only claggy day we had, and setting off through the clag from the hut, winding away around towards the back of the mountain, up the ridge. We'd cached our skis when it got a bit steep and narrow, and we clambered up through the mist. And those sort of days where you think, it's kind of light above my head. It's getting brighter. And then, if you're lucky on those rare days, you break out through the cloud. And for us, it happened pretty much as we came onto the summit ridge, up above this sea of cloud. And there's always that feeling of elation when you reach a summit. But to combine that with breaking out through the cloud and suddenly getting these tremendous vistas is such a great and positive feeling. So here we are, looking very happy, very pleased with ourselves. Mont Blanc there in the background, blue skies, sunshine, very, very, very happy. I really enjoyed this day. It was such a nice climb up, such a satisfying summit, and a lovely ski back down off. Looking in the opposite direction from that last photograph, this is the view, which is a lovely view in itself. But the significance of this is that the low point on the horizon there is Col Malatra. Col Malatra is the thing that has loomed in my mind. To my mind, it was the crux of the whole thing. Would it go? Wouldn't it go? What's it like on the other side? Speaking to other eagles, there wasn't a great deal of knowledge on this. I struggled to find very much written about it. It's not as if I'm doing anything new. I don't think there's anything new to do in the Alps, but it's perhaps not an often trod route. And so I was a little bit anxious about that. Not the approach. The approach is straightforward. It's down the other side. So this is what we were going to do the next day. So here we are, day 3, Col Malatra to Refugio Frassati. The col's at 2929 meters. The sort of height where you're starting to feel the effects of altitude. But I'm pleased to say, I think we were all reasonably fit. We'd had a warm-up day the day before. We seemed to cope just fine with what we were doing. So we left Rifugio Bonatti, worked our way up, went up that broad valley that you could see leading towards Col Malatra, dropped down the other side and round to Rifugio Frassati. Cold, bright morning as we left. Skiing up the valley that we'd skied in the Clag the day before. The sun peeping over the tops of the mountains there as we ski towards it. We're going to go up the valley and turn into the left below the horizon there, between the rocks in the foreground and the horizon. Climbing up the steep part. Now this picture's good because in the background, behind the person in the foreground, that is Tête Entre Deux Sautes, the hill we were on the day before. It's almost looking diminutive now with Mont Blanc in the background. And the nice thing about this was that we got all our steep bit of climbing done in the shade before the sun got to us, and so we didn't overheat. We're going up this broad valley that we could see. You could see that same low point on the horizon, Col Malatra we're heading for. Breaking out into the sunshine, well, by the time we did, we were pleased to get a little bit of warmth. We weren't climbing so hard now, and it was chilly in the shade. Chance to take a break, have something to eat, have something to drink. The last little bit up onto the col, some of us are absolutely determined to sidestep all the way up the last bit. Others of us will boot up. And the first look down the other side. Well, I guess the photograph's a bit foreshortened, so it doesn't look too bad here. But this is what had focused in my mind for 3 years. We were going to ski down this slope, and then you can see some tracks heading around in the distance, which is broadly speaking where we were heading. This is us coming down the far side. It was a side slip off the top, but steepest. It might have been 40 degrees, but it eased off a bit fairly quickly and down the slope. But it's a big old slope. Here's looking back at the slope. We can see we've come off just to the left of that prominent tooth, and there's a tiny speck about a quarter of the way down. That's somebody else coming down behind us. That is one big slope. You really wouldn't want to be there if it gave way. There have been avalanches in preceding days. You can see from that tooth, you can see a line that slid and come all the way down to the bottom. And then lower down, the slopes were more easy angled, and the snow was friendlier. And whoop whoop, it was good fun lower down. And it was so much good fun that we overshot our descent deliberately, just to enjoy the snow, and then climbed back up to Rifugio Frassati, looking like something a bit space agey here. And find a little corner in amongst the building, sheltered from the breeze and in the sunshine, and take our ease. To some extent, this is a point at which I felt, right, cracked it, I've done the tricky bit. Looking back out from the hut, this is looking down into the Italian valleys. One variant on the plan was that we would descend to a hotel in the valley at about 2,000 meters and climb one of the peaks over there to the right. But obviously, looking at this photograph, that wouldn't have worked, or we would have had a long walk. So I'm glad we changed our plans and came up with an alternative. On the southern side of the Alps that year, the snow was particularly poor, and you'll find that different years, different snow cover, different conditions as a generality in the Alps, which if you keep in touch with what's going on as the season develops, you might want to change your plans as you approach your tour. Here's the Frassati hut. Steve sitting in the sun there. Just to the left of Steve, there's an area of shade with a set of steps leading up. That's the winter room door, the entrance into where we would spend the night. It's as I said before, it has no power, no lights, no cooking facilities, no running water, and the windows are boarded up. So it's a dark black hole. It does have bunk beds, and I'm very, very pleased to say it did have duvets. And we were waiting. That shadow is covering the door, as you see there, and we were just waiting for the moment when the sun would come through the crack in the door and shed light into our quarters, which it did. We got an inch wide beam of light came into the hut, and then the sun sank behind the mountains. A little bit disappointing. Here's hut life in a winter room. Boots still on, gloves on, hats on, duvet jackets on, cooking up our dehydrated meals and getting some food fuel into us. One of the themes of this is melting water. Melt water, melt water, melt water. You have to rehydrate. You have to get water to make your dehydrated meals, and you have to have water for your next day's tour. So collect snow, melt water, make food, make drinks, get drinks down you, get food down you. So day 4, coldest, the three cold day. Col de Singles, Col de Saint-Remy, Col du Grand Saint-Bernard, and heading for a hut called Plan de Joux at 2070 meters. We came out the hut in the morning to the early sun bathing the hills in this wonderful golden light. It also highlights, you can see, particularly showing up either side of these little avalanches, a sort of an orangeness on the snow. This is Saharan dust that has been blown in from big storms over the Sahara, and then this dust settles on the alpine snowpack at times, and doesn't make for the best skiing, but wasn't a problem to us. Here we are, farewell to Frassati, as we set off to go up onto Col de Singles, up across various old avalanche runouts, which is tricky going, and approaching the col, boot packing up onto the col, pleased with ourselves on the col. The col was easy enough to get to, and we can see where we're going, and that doesn't look too intimidating. Nice group photo there. Col de Singles, 2009 meters. Here's our route from here. Drop down the other side, along the side of this valley to pick up Col Saint-Remy, which is at the bottom of those rocks where the hill sort of flattens out, trying to take a nice long traverse there. I like this picture. Just such happy faces, like a bunch of cheeky monkeys. Long traverse down out of that valley, not wanting to drop too much height to save us having to climb back up. This is the Col Saint-Remy, not such an obvious and pronounced col, but good to get to nonetheless. This is quite good because it lets us see where we're going. So down at the bottom here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, that's the road we're going to pick up, and it's got snow in it and will enable us to climb back up the valley. And over here is the Hospice Grand Saint-Bernard, which we'll see a few pictures of in a minute. But that's the journey from here on out, and then we'll descend down the other side to Plan de Joux. So here, looking back up, you can see Col Saint-Remy. We've dropped off that onto the road, climb up to Col de Saint-Bernard, and this is the Hospice Grand Saint-Bernard. It's run by a monastic order to help people, historically, to help travelers, whether they be pilgrims or traders that would be traveling through the mountains and would otherwise have perished. And it's grown over the years, and it's a big place now. I can't recommend it highly enough. I'm sure it's wonderful in the summer, but to go there in winter is absolutely stunning. You're in amongst the mountains, the snow, and you come across this magnificent place. And we stopped in there for lunch. Bread, cheese, meat, soup, and a glass of wine. How good is that? All looking a little bit scruffy, not least me, after 2 or 3 days out without a shave. And inside, this is one of the chapels inside. Here we are. We're up at 2,500 meters ish, inside a building in the mountain, and this magnificent chapel. They also have a museum up there of the history of the place. Really, really interesting. A rapid icy descent from the hospice down into the valley, and up to a short climb up to this hut called the Plan de Jus. It's always had a reputation for very good food, but the proprietor changed, I think in the year that before we went. So you know, is it going to be any good? Well, I can tell you, this guy takes up pride. He loves to cook and he loves to feed people. And if I went out for a, you know, fairly top end meal at a restaurant and I got served up what he gave us, I would be pleased as punch. Is tremendous. I'd go back there just for the food. But then you're getting the message. I like my food. So day 5, Le Mont Tellier, 2951 meters. Neil at this point headed home. He'd to see his newborn child, which was very bold of him to come out on this tour when he had just got something as special as that happen in his life. And I think his wife was probably very pleased to see him home as well. On the Kath Murphy's training week, just a few weeks earlier, I'd climbed Mont Tellier, so I backed out of that day as well. And Marcus and Steve went up this hill. If you're in the area, lovely, lovely hill, quite achievable. If you're looking for something to do, that's one to go for. So here we are, as Marcus coming up the ridge, the final ridge to the summit, and 2 happy chappies on the top. That night we went down into Bourg-Saint-Pierre, stayed at a little hotel called the Le Petit Villa, I think it is. Nice hotel, served us very well. Nice little village. I'd gone down that morning, and so I'd been able to do a bit of a reconnoiter for our following day. Now, our plan had been to go from Bourg-Saint-Pierre, which is up at the top of the picture here, to a hill to the north of that. But when I crossed the river, there'd been a large landslide sometime earlier, and you couldn't get access in that direction. But what I did find was that the track through the woods, heading broadly south, had good snow cover and would give us access back up the valley to go and climb Becker Colin to 813 meters. And so that was our plan. And here we are tracking along through the woods and going past the dam there. And for those civil engineers amongst you, this is a fine example of a double curvature concrete dam. Terribly interesting. And here we are. This is the upper slopes of Becker Colin. Marcus and I got so far, and we were just really contented with where we had got to. We had set ourselves the objective of turning at 2 o'clock. That was our cutoff point. So we were content we weren't going to make the top for 2, but Steve, don't know what they were feeding him, but I could do with a bit of that. He went for the top, and I think this is him skiing back down, and we're looking at him thinking, put a turn in, put a turn in. You don't want to go off that edge. Meanwhile, we were quite content just to go up onto a little subsidiary top and take in the view. And I think that is Mont Velin in the background. And so that takes me to the end of the talk. What sums up hut to hut touring? Well, fabulous places, great friends, a little bit of spice, but for me, not too much, and hut to hut life and food, of course. So I hope you've enjoyed the talk. I hope maybe you've been inspired to think about going to the Alps if you haven't already, to think about hut to hut touring if you haven't already, and maybe even to consider leading a tour yourself, or to explore whether that would be appropriate to you at some time in the future. So thank you very much for listening to my ramblings, and I think I'll stop sharing and I'll hand back to Kathy.
Thank you, Angus. That was absolutely fabulous, including your absolutely shining enthusiasm for ski touring and hut to huts and learning and just doing interesting things.
Well, doesn't everybody?
Well, you're a particularly good example of it. So we're open for questions. Put up a virtual hand or type your question into the chat. And as you think about that, I'll start quickly. Angus, why that particular tour for your first tour?
That's a good question. Well, I thought it would be helpful to be doing something where I felt I had a degree of familiarity. Actually, I didn't put this in my little speed through what I've been up to, but in 2019, I had been on a tour in the area of Saint Bernard with Keith Hampson. And so I had a little bit of knowledge of that area. I'd liked what I'd seen. I'd loved the hospice. And I thought it'd be great to go back through that. And one of the things I've always enjoyed doing with this sort of thing is looking at maps, poring over maps, and so, oh, look, maybe we could go from there to there. There's a route through the mountains. Oh, now that would be interesting. And so it was that idea of piecing one thing together with another, and the through journey. For me, mountaineering has been about the journey. I love the journey. I love the adventure. I love the friends and peaks. I love getting a peak. We all love getting a peak, but it's about the journey. And so linking together a journey through the mountains like that was really satisfying. And the little bit of familiarity for my first tour.
So the people you had on your tour, were they all people you'd skied with before? Were they complete strangers? Maybe talk us through a little bit the process of getting to select who comes with you.
Yeah, strangers. Never met them before. No idea what they're like. But I suppose the process of selection started with the tour description. I had been on events where there's been a disparate group. There are people with different objectives, and so they're frustrated because they're not getting to do their hair out a trap thing, and others of us are frustrated because we feel under pressure to move faster or do more or whatever. And so I really emphasized in the tour description that we would work as a team, and we would make decisions as a team, and we wouldn't put people under pressure to do things that they weren't comfortable with. And so that started the selection. And then obviously we had online Zoom chats and talked about what our aspirations were and how we would go about it. And we didn't ditch anybody. and it turned out, I mean, Steve was really fit. He was going for it, but not in a way that he made any of the rest of us feel uncomfortable or put us under pressure to do more. And he was a really good member of the team. It was really good to have team, because Steve was definitely more experienced in the mountains, in the Alpine mountains, than I was, and it was great to have someone like that as sort of my lieutenant. So no, great team, worked well together.
Great, sounds really nice. Anna, I see you've got a question. Do you want to turn on your mic and your camera and join the discussion?
Hiya, thanks very much. Great talk, and well done. I guess one of the things I was going to ask is that your pictures are lovely, and I know we always take photos when the weather's good, but did you have a plan B? Because if you're going with a group of people that you may not know, and they all have high expectations, did you talk about a plan B if the weather was really bad? Because I've always been worried about sort of really the weather, and getting in a situation where the weather's really rubbish and what to do at that point.
You're absolutely right, Anna. And as I spoke to other people, people like Phil Jardin and folks who've done a lot of this sort of thing, and they say have a plan B and C and D and E. You can't have enough backup plans. That was a downside to this particular route. When you got to the Bonati, if we were going to go to Saint Bernard, well, we had to get through Colmilatra. if we'd gone up Col Malatra and it was an ice field on the other side, or if it was really twitchy conditions avalanche wise, we wouldn't have gone down that slope. And I was absolutely prepared to turn back off that. You know, probably in my mind before I left the country, it was a 50-50 as to whether we would go down that slope. And I think it's really good to have pre-prepared myself, so to speak, to be prepared to back off it. Plan B was difficult, because if we wanted to reconnect with the route, it was a long way around, but we may have had to have done that and go back down into the valley and get a taxi round to go up into the San Bernard Valley. And the other option would have been to back out of that area and revert to the Chamonix, Argentière sort of area, and perhaps done day tours from there. But it would have, I didn't have a planned out plan B, and I was aware that my backup plans weren't as developed as I'd like them to be. And I got lucky. I got lucky with the weather. I got lucky with the avalanche conditions. You know, you don't get lucky if you don't try.
Thank you. Thank you.
So coming back to the team, did you manage to get it to be a group making decisions, or did you find them all looking to you as the one who kind of had the pre-plan of the route and sort of an idea of where you wanted it to go?
Well, we had the planned out route. We knew what we were going to do day by day. We all knew that before we left. I'd shared copious numbers of maps. And so nothing came as a surprise to folks, I suppose. And so in terms of decision making, the route defined itself largely. As to the precise detail of what we did, we'd sort of yeah, we would just talk it like a group of mates. There wasn't this feeling of one person dictating or anything like that. We just talk things through as a group of, just like a group of mates on any old hill. So as I say, I was lucky. You know, we gelled well and we got on well.
So do you think you'll lead again for the club, or do you have something in mind?
I would like to do something next year. And I really like the idea of multi-day trips. Possibly we might do some, maybe sort of 2 times 3 days sort of a thing. So we would find ourselves a base and go and pick some things off that you might not be able to do in a single day, and come back and then go off and do something else in the other direction. So I've got a sketch plan in the back of my mind for when I'm ready to go.
Excellent, something to look out for. So any more questions? Michael, I can see you've got your hand up. Why don't you join the chat?
There was a couple of points. What was your sort of insurance cover like? How did that work for, you know, rescue and things like that, and also personal injury? And did you compile risk assessments sort of individually for each day in any kind of formal way?
Risk assessments, individual day risk assessments, no. Did we do a global risk assessment? I think in planning a route and thinking about being in the mountains, that is a form of risk assessment. It's not formal, but you are thinking about the risks. And as I said, I'd identified the Col Malatra as one of the key passages. And so you are, you know, we are doing some form of risk assessment there, being aware of the avalanche conditions and monitoring that and the weather. It's what I like to call a dynamic risk assessment. Whilst I see the value in a formal written up risk assessment, I think there's a danger also in that people think, right, I've done my risk assessment, I'll put that in the book and put it on the shelf. Whereas when we're in the mountains, we should be continually assessing the risk. And that's what I call a dynamic risk assessment. In terms of insurance, I am a member of the Alpine Club, and I've got the cover that probably many of us have for that, but that isn't as comprehensive as I would like, and I had cover with one of the other major providers. I'm not sure I can bring to mind who it was with at this point.
Right. Because I asked because I'm sort of a tour leader with the Austrian Alpine Club.
Yes.
Led a couple of about three or four now hut-to-hut tours and sort of multi-day tours in the Alps, and we're very sort of hot on risk assessment and also making sure that proper insurances are covered, and all the people who actually lead tours for the AAC are covered by their, not just their personal insurance plan, but by a more global plan, which actually covers you should anything go wrong. And one of the people that you're taking on your trip decide for whatever reason that they want to sue you or anything like that, we're actually covered for that kind of eventuality as well. And I was just wondering if there was a similar sort of system within the Eagle Club.
Yes, there is. And that's
Yeah.
actually part of why the Eagles is now under the Scottish Mountaineering. It also means that somebody like me, who's not British and doesn't live in Britain, can no longer lead for the Eagles, though I used to. The club insurance requires that you're either that you're resident in Britain or British. So we've gone under Scottish Mountaineering to get liability and that kind of higher level insurance cover for club members who lead. Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Any other questions from anyone? While you're taking a moment to think, the club is always looking for more leaders. So if you're interested or you've skied with people who you think have got potential, please encourage them to join the program. There's some really good training to be got by going through the club leading program. And Rick Marchant is training right this week with the next set of club leaders. And there were a couple of open spaces on that tour, which were then open to people, even if you've already done it or you're not quite ready to lead yet. And remember, this is all subsidized by the club. So it's very good value to go on one of these leader training weeks. And even if you don't think you're quite ready to lead, take a spare place.
Do. I'll back Kath up on that. A week with Rick Marchant is most definitely not a week wasted. You'll do great things with him. You'll learn a lot of stuff, and you'll have a lot of fun with a really, really good guy. So, yep, go for it.